Persona 4's manga is actually really good. Right after I finished the Persona 3 manga and got my totally calm opinions about it laid out in a video, I was instantly itching to dive into Persona 4's manga adaptation next. I was shivering in my timbers wondering if my favorite Persona game of all time would succumb to the same fate as its predecessor, but I was pleasantly surprised by a very well done adaptation that even surpasses the game in some ways. Just like the Persona 3 manga, this one also took 10 years to complete, but unlike P3's, it wasn't a disgrace to the namesake. First things first, this manga is actually in order. Okay, I won't make the same joke twice, but seriously, that alone makes it better than P3's by far, because it's at the very least chronologically in order, but it does good beyond that. This manga gives characterization to Narukami, or well, I guess Soji Seita in this instance, in an interesting way that I loved. Basically every key moment is still intact and done with grace, and they make some adjustments both big and small here and there to make this story worth reading not just for fans of P4, but for newcomers as well. This is something the P3 manga failed in drastically, but this isn't meant to be a hate video for that manga, so I'm gonna try not to bring it up too much anymore. There's a lot to go into for this video, so let's break this story down volume by volume so I can show you all the changes the manga made. This video is assuming you have at least some knowledge of Persona 4 since I'm not going to be going over everything, but I'll try to make things as easy to understand as possible. The very start of volume 1 already shakes things up by giving a flashback of Soji's past. Nope, I can't do this, I have to call him Narukami, I'm sorry. We see a flashback of Narukami's past and how he felt about having to move away from home to Inaba. He's had to move and transfer a lot because of his parents, which has led to him having little to no friends or bonds, and in his own words, he's found it best to keep everyone at arm's length. Not too dissimilar to a certain detective we see later in the story. Mostly everything from then on remains the same, with him shaking the innocent gas attendant's hand and all that good jazz. We do see a dope ass panel where it recreates the PS2 Persona 4 main menu, which was awesome. Around the time Sakiko Nishi is first on screen is when this volume changes direction pretty dramatically. Rather than being from the point of view of Narukami, Yosuke is more or less the protagonist of this volume. It shows his inner thoughts and feelings to a greater degree than the game does, which is something this manga does a lot actually. Something else this manga does is give a small breakdown on the mangaka's opinions and views on a character and what he's trying to achieve with them. In Yosuke's case, he states, in this volume, Yosuke basically acts like the main character, and I wanted to emphasize his relationship with Soji moving forward. Yosuke's social link essentially starts at max level, which will make sense as we get deeper into this volume. Yosuke sees Saki on the Midnight Channel, she passes away, and they gear up to head back into the TV world to see if they can figure things out. All the while he talks about his feelings regarding the whole ordeal. Narukami awakens his persona to Yosuke's jealousy and bewilderment, and soon after he comes face to face with his shadow self. This is where I can talk about what the manga did differently in regards to the shadow battles. While the team are fighting the shadow forms, instead of the person in question being unconscious or just generally not present for the fight, they're actively viewing what's happening. They'll be encouraged by the team to face themselves during the fight instead of after, which allows them to face themselves both literally and figuratively, since they awaken to their other self and defeat them at the same time. Each awakening moment has differences to them of course, but hey, that's why I gotta explain it on a case-by-case basis. In Yosuke's case, while he's rejecting his other self, Narukami slaps the fuck out of him on some Sendo vs Ippo type shit and knocks some sense into him. He gives a little speech to Yosuke to get him back to his senses, which is kinda interesting since they only just met at this point, but if you recall what the mangaka said about this volume, it kinda makes sense that they did it this way. Yosuke accepts his feelings about himself and Saki and defeats his own shadow form with his persona, Jiraiya. This is also interesting because the shadows are meant to be your other self, so the fact he awakens to it and is able to just defeat himself in the same breath is kind of an interesting spin on it. I do think Yosuke's character arc happens a little too quickly. I mean, they're showing his entire social link and awakening like all at once basically. But considering what they do later in the manga alongside just being starved for time by being a manga, I think it's fine. After the battle, it goes into the part of Yosuke's social link where they brawl things out, only this time being in the TV world with their personas. They vow to solve the case, which marks the end of Volume 1. I think Volume 1 in itself clears the entirety of Persona 3's manga. I know I said I would stop talking about it so much, but it's honestly cathartic for me to diss that manga at any chance I get. I'm sorry. But really, I do think it sets up the pace of the manga and story really well. Volume 2 starts with the first one-on-one conversation with Yukiko, and similarly to Yosuke, we get to see some of her inner thoughts as well, about feeling trapped at the Amagi Inn and how she wants to run away. Yukiko then appears on the Midnight Channel not long after, and the manga does a funny thing where Narukami and Yosuke peek into the TV world and see each other just floating in there. Pretty damn dumb. Once they actually enter the TV world for real, we get to see the way the manga includes the inner dialogue of the characters as it happens in the game. They dedicate a few pages or so to letting the shadows say their piece as they traverse through the dungeon, which I think is a pretty good way to do it. Chie comes face to face with her shadow, and just like it happened with Yosuke, she has to accept herself in the middle of the battle. Since Chie's shadow is about her inner feelings about Yukiko and herself, it gives us a small flashback to Yukiko in Chie's past. If you've seen the P4 anime, it's very similar to how it happens in that as well, which makes me wonder if the anime took a lot of inspiration from the manga, cause this is a recurring theme that happens a lot. It shows how the two of them met and how Chie felt a need to protect her. Chie accepts herself, then defeats Shadow Chie with Tomoe. Really good fight and paneling, by the way. They did Chie pretty damn good justice. In fact, they did Chie justice throughout the entire manga. She has a lot of cute and cool moments. Yukiko's awakening is largely the same in the manga, just with the differences I've detailed a couple times already. But the moments with Chie and Yukiko afterward are great, where they console each other on their inner feelings and forge an even deeper bond. I mean, this panel is just fire, like, come on now. Narukami and Yosuke afterward eat up all of Chie and Yukiko's ramen to their dismay, we get the infamous gag glasses moment, and they include a moment where Chie and Yukiko walk on the riverbank just to chat about their shadow selves and their futures. Since the manga can't go over every single social link, they try to make up for it with new moments like this, which I think works just fine for a manga adaptation. Since it isn't bound by what we, the player, see in real time through Narukami, they can do whatever they want with the character interactions, which is ideally what you'd want to see from an adaptation like this. When it does focus on Narukami in this manga though, that is ironically when I do think it's at its best, so we're gonna go over that pretty soon. Once Yukiko is rescued, it goes into the scene in the Dojima residence where Dojima tries to reserve time off for Golden Week so they can spend time together, but of course it ends up getting cancelled. Since the manga immediately established Narukami's past and character in the first couple pages, they continue with this throughout the rest of the manga as well. In this particular scene, Narukami recalls moments in his own past where his parents had to choose work over him, so he sympathizes with Nanuko's situation. This gives even more weight and substance to all the moments they have together since Narukami has greater emotional baggage in it instead of just being a good person as is portrayed in the game itself. Both ways of doing it are fine, by the way, so don't take the comparisons as me saying one is better than the other. The manga is just complementary to the game, which is a good thing. After the scenes with the gang taking Nanuko to Junes conclude, Volume 2 ends on our first impressions of Kanji and Naoto. I feel like Volume 3 is when things kind of start kicking off in the manga, because in my notes, the first couple volumes are pretty short and sweet, but then we get to Volume 3 and 4 and it's like... Damn, that was a fucking horrible explosion noise. Holy shit, I sounded like Donald Duck giving a fucking blowjob. But whatever. But I'm gonna try to keep it concise because we've already established how the manga has been changing the story in general. The investigation regarding Kanji is basically the exact same. The main difference is that once again we get to see a flashback with Kanji's past and what led him to becoming who he is today. As we all know, Kanji is into things seen as feminine, and throughout his life he's been ostracized about it, so he puts a mask on to hide it by acting like this big old macho kind of guy. Kanji's awakening scene is a lot different than the others, however. In the manga, once Kanji comes to, he straight up fights his shadow alone. I really like this approach because I feel like it fits Kanji well while also incorporating that aspect of his awakening scene in the game where he punches his shadow. He's able to face himself and his inner fears by using some of that macho-esque-ness. Is that even a word? I don't know, but he's able to accept himself in a way that only works for him is basically what I'm getting at. Unlike the other characters, right after they rescue Kanji, it actually goes right into his social link where he makes a doll for the little kid, which makes him feel even more accepted. Considering how Kanji is kinda hated in Japan, I expected him to not get much love in this adaptation, but the mangaka did well on him, which I was glad to see. Now when it comes to the camping trip, all I'm gonna say is if you don't like it in the game, you're definitely not gonna like it in this manga, simple as. Before we even start Volume 4, I just want to say that the mangaka made it very clear that Rise is his favorite character in the little character overview thing, which becomes apparent very quickly. This volume is where we first see the Mitsuo scene where he asks Yukiko out, which is a lot later than how it usually happens in the game. The Risei investigation is exactly the same with Kanji airing out Yosuke's feelings for the world to see and all that good jazz, and on June 30th we see another diverting point for the manga. In this adaptation, for whatever reason, Risei, before even being saved by the investigation team, opens up to Narukami about her feelings of being an idol and whatnot, which is kinda out of place. It's one of the moments I'm not too fond of in the manga since it makes way more sense for all of this to happen after the investigation, but it's not the biggest deal. It took all the way to volume 4 for me to find something I wasn't a fan of, which is not too bad for an adaptation to be honest. I will say though, the Shadow Risei fight is actually a good bit different from the game. Instead of them all fighting Shadow Risei together, Kanji and Yosuke are taken out by Risei's seduction, cause you know, fan service, right? While Yukiko and Chie fight, Narukami helps Risei in the backline. Teddy at this point is just a navigator, so he's kinda just chilling, trying his best. Also, fun fact, the mangaka said he made Risei's bust size bigger to differentiate the two, which at least makes more sense than what he did with Mitsuru. That was fucking dumb as hell, bro. You know, it actually makes sense that this is the case, since her measurements are faked in the idol industry for sex appeal, which is just an entire other can of worms that I'm not well equipped to tackle today, so let's just continue on ahead. Something weird happens around the middle part of the Shadow Risei fight though. We see another flashback of Narukami's past as well as Risei's past. What I believe is happening is Shadow Risei in the manga is analyzing their fears or past to use that against them. Since Teddy has no past, he's unaffected and faces the shadow as he does in the game. As he's doing that, we get another glimpse into how Risei became an idol and how it affected her. It goes into her struggle of feeling people want to be friends with the fake idol version of herself instead of herself. The friend who helped her get into being an idol wants nothing to do with her, and we also see the fan letters from her social link. I think implementing the fan letters and her backstory into this flashback scene fits pretty well, and the panel where Risei says she wants to be like Risei hits hard and fits the theme of the game perfectly. It also shows a rivalry between Kanamine, which is another part of her social link. Like the other characters, they're implementing most of her social link into this little sequence here. Once Teddy does his Super Teddy Kamikaze attack, Risei is able to accept her shadow. Shadow Teddy appears, and Risei with her new Navigator persona gets everyone ready for battle, marking the end of Volume 4. Volume 5 continues the Shadow fight, which happens in the same way more or less. The only difference is that Risei doesn't know anyone, so she uses goofy descriptors to navigate everyone, and everyone indirectly introduces themselves. Teddy gets his persona, Social Link Rank 1 happens, again it's all mostly the same. This volume once again shows the mangaka's preference for Risei because she immediately gets the spotlight by having another part of her social link shown. I'm pretty sure Risei is the only character to have basically every rank of her shown and expanded upon in the entire manga, so if you're a Risei fan, you're probably going to enjoy this manga to a pretty good extent. Dojima comes home drunk that night, then King Moron gets slimed that morning. Risei joins the team, and while they're discussing the case, Naoto comes through with her little speech. Only difference here is that Yosuke got more physical, but the interaction is the same beyond that. After that meeting is when by far my favorite change of the manga happens. While Yosuke is walking home, he sees Naoki. In this manga, the Naoki social link is tied to Yosuke instead of Narukami, which is an extremely interesting change. Naoki is one of the best social links in the entire series if you ask me, and I think Yosuke being the one to be there for him instead of Narukami makes perfect sense. I mean, Yosuke loved Sakiko Nishi romantically and had personal venture in that whole case, whereas Narukami, while playing an important role, didn't have any personal feeling in it. Yosuke wants to help Naoki, but in this first appearance, he can't do much since, you know, Naoki at this point hates him and everyone around him. This is elaborated upon more in the coming chapters, which made me instantly engrossed in the manga because I wanted to see more of these interactions. And I didn't have to wait long to see more because it's elaborated upon a lot without much time in between. After the gang discusses the exams, we see them together again, and this one is the link where they're chilling in the shopping district eating those beef skewers. Yosuke gets the old lady to piss off, and he has this gnarly look in his eyes like he's got a cold cut killer look on his face. Not really, but you know what I'm saying. After seeing that, Naoki trusts Yosuke a lot more since they have a lot in common regarding the passing of Saki. Since they became closer after that last link, it leads into the next part of that link where Naoki talks about people looking down on him and how he feels like he has no purpose. They drag Narukami and Kanji along for this one, and Naoki reveals that he actually looks up to Yosuke in some ways, not realizing he's got similar issues as him. Neither of them know for sure what they want to do in the future, which consoles him ever so slightly. After that, I mean, the Mitsuo dungeon is largely the exact same. They do draw their own map in the dungeon though, which is funny since I've been going through Persona Q for the first time, so I know all about that by this point. Volume 5 ends on Dojima seeing Naoki and taking interest in him, which I don't even think leads anywhere, so I don't really know why this was included, but whatever. The Shadow Mitsuo fight is pretty tight, because Yosuke flips out at the sight of Shadow Mitsuo and his antics. He tries to attack it alone and gets absolutely smoked, but quickly stops playing hero and trusts in his allies. A flashback happens where Yosuke gets the handkerchief from Naoki, and he wipes the dirt off his face with it in battle. He strikes the final blow in Saki's memory, which is a cute touch. After they get Mitsuo detained, it goes to Naoki's rank 9 link where he's at the scene of Saki's death, this time Yosuke being the one there yet again. Yosuke ends up crying alongside Naoki since they've had the same struggle, as I've said. It's an absolutely amazing way to implement this into the story, and like I said, it's my favorite change by far. The moment where they cook almond rice for Nanako happens as usual, the summer festival shrine thingy happens, and there's some fast cuts of the summer vacation. After the watermelon eating party, it goes into Dojima's social link where he makes coffee and talks about Chisato, who is his late wife. Narukami doesn't say much here and just listens, and once the conversation concludes, it shows Naoto's transfer to Yasugami. Not long after, the Gekkoukan High trip starts, which is the end of Volume 6. It starts with Mr. Edogawa's boring ass lecture, but he does give a nice lore dump on Izanami and Izanagi. This isn't a story analysis, so I'm going to glance over this, but it's really cool that they included this, since it gives a first-time reader or someone new to the mythology some background on the story. The next day is the club escapade trip. The King's game is mostly the same, but Narukami is just chilling out looking goofy as hell, which I think is awesome if you ask me. The rest of the trip is the same, and after they leave Teddy looking stupefied in the ramen shop, it leads into some stuff with Nanako. It's a dream sequence where she's helping out some twin sisters and their relationship. It shows heaven, and honestly, I don't really know what's going on here. I'm assuming this is supposed to show Nanako's inner struggle about her feelings in general. Naoto is seen on the Midnight Channel not long after, and they enter the secret base. It has a cool intro, and we get to see more of Sogabe's love for Rise as if it wasn't obvious enough already. Similarly to the rest of the cast, we see a manga exclusive moment of Naoto's past and her struggle. She didn't have many friends and liked the novels her grandpa had, so she dreamed of being like the people in the novels. It leads into all of them confronting the shadow form itself. As Naoto is failing to accept her other self, Kanji tells him to let it happen so she can face herself directly and they can help her in doing so, which is honestly one of my favorite moments in the entire game, and they did a great job of adapting it. Very interestingly, in the manga, this is where Kanji evolves his own persona. He basically solo Shadow Naoto all on his own, all the while Rise consoles Naoto about what she said before. You know, about it all being a game to Naoto. It's actually a really good moment, and Rise's words of encouragement alongside the others allow her to accept herself. I think Chie in this moment uses God's Hand, which means she's like what, level 76 or something in the secret base dungeon, which is kind of a power play if you ask me. Naoto gets the final blow in to defeat her shadow, she accepts it fully, and the base is about to self-destruct. Now Narukami here just easily runs with Naoto in his arms, which I mean that shit is a lot harder than it looks, so he's definitely stronger than he looks. Volume 7 ends with them looking at the base exploding as they realize they still have their work cut out for them to find the killer. So we've now seen everyone's awakenings firsthand, and I want to say they were all pretty damn good. None of them were bad, and I enjoyed what they did with them. From here on out, I don't need to spend too much time on each volume besides the final ones, since the biggest changes have already happened. The drag queen bit is actually pretty funny in the manga though, I'm not gonna lie, because Narukami goes all in on the delinquent girl type persona, which adds a lot to the moment. That's not ladylike behavior, like you go man, you go. People still thirst over Teddy, which I guess is understandable. The swimsuit contest happens as usual, and I'm just gonna let you see that for yourself. I don't really want to get banned off YouTube, and they spend more time with Nanako. Since we're closing in on the Heaven Dungeon, they're starting to show Nanako's loneliness and feelings regarding her family. Dojima leaves Nanako with the rest of the cast, and she's clearly saddened by it. Now, if I thought the swimsuit thing would get me banned, the hot springs would definitely get me banned, so we're skipping over that for sure. But they do use Persona 4 Arena's hit counter, which is super fucking based, like shout out to the mangaka for knowing ball. The following night, a couple things happen. For one, the news broadcast that shows Nanako's letter plays, and the social link with Nanako showing the parent request form thingy happens as well. Since Narukami isn't a blank slate in this adaptation and we know more about his past, he sympathizes with Nanako's position and encourages her to open up about her feelings to Dojima. It then leads into the moment Nanako decides to run away from home, all the while Dojima in the background is starting to change as well, realizing he can't keep running from reality forever. Moments like this are what make the adaptation really good. While it's not able to show everything with every character, it shows the most important moments. Blending in Nanako's social link like this, having Narukami share similar feelings and experiences to Nanako, it all works super well. You'd think the pacing would be bad since it goes through the links and story events quicker than the game does, but nah, it's like actually pretty good. The following day, it continues the social link where Nanako realizes Dojima has similar feelings to her and hopes they can all be happy again, which makes it all the more tragic that it immediately leads into the next investigation. Narukami receives another letter, which leads to the moments we are all well aware of. Dojima takes Narukami to the police station, and interestingly, this is where the part of Dojima's social link about there being no new cases comes up. It's a bit jarring, but I do think it kinda works. Narukami is potentially a part of this brand new case not too dissimilar to the one regarding his wife, and that scares him. So in this manga, Narukami decides to tell him the entire truth, knowing full well he won't believe it, which of course he doesn't, and then Nanako appears on the Midnight Channel. This moment is mostly the same, the only difference being once they arrive at the scene where Dojima crashed, Narukami almost has a mental breakdown. Throughout the entire manga, the relationship between Narukami and Nanako has been a key focus, so this alongside the other events is just an absolutely perfect way to characterize this silent protag. He's been seen as this perfect level-headed guy thus far, but everyone has their breaking point. Volume 9 then concludes on them entering the TV world to save Nanako. Some more really good character development for Narukami is at the start of Volume 10, where he himself had to go to Parents' Day alone when he was a child, which makes the whole situation more saddening and personal for him. As they enter the Heaven Dungeon, Rise's persona evolves since she had resolved to continue her idol career in the previous volume. Once they confront Namatame and he transforms, this is one of my favorite moments and changes in the manga. So the main gimmick of this boss fight is that Namatame can control the party members to fight against you, but in the manga he uses Narukami's innermost fears to control him, something not possible in the game itself. Seeing everyone grow and evolve around him has helped him do the same, and those feelings and bonds help him break free from the trap. I mean, holy fuck, bro. I mean, the way they were able to characterize Narukami while keeping that feeling of emptiness and the essence of the wild card is really impressive. For the longest time, I've said the Persona 4 animation is my favorite adaptation, and that's probably still true, but the Persona 4 manga is right up there with it because of moments like this. Once he breaks free, they defeat Namatame and get Nanako to the ICU. When everyone returns home, Narukami is reminded of the loneliness he felt as a child when he came back home alone. Having Nanako and Dojima around gave him some peace of mind and comfort, but now he's alone again. Which is just like, fuck bro, like damn. They capture that feeling you get in the game so well when you're home alone for the first time and you just feel completely empty. Interestingly, since Persona 4 Golden had been released by this time since the manga took like 10 years to fucking complete, Sogabe decided to implement some parts of Adachi's social link into the mix. I didn't think there was going to be any Golden content, but if there's any place to do it, then I think right here is about the best time. Similarly to how Narukami and Nanako could relate to each other in their relationships with their parents and feelings, Narukami can relate to Adachi's feelings in some ways, which is something the manga tries to explore slightly with the Golden inclusions. The gang visits Nanako in the hospital, and Narukami gives her the family photo to give her some comfort, which leads us to December 3rd. Any fan of Persona 4 knows exactly how important the next few days are, and the manga explores it in a bit of a different way, and it hurts bad. So as Nanako is in critical condition, normally in the game Dojima doesn't make it in time before you know what happens, but in the manga it focuses on Dojima and Nanako in that moment rather than her and Narukami. Nanako talks about how glad she was that Dojima didn't forget about her, her mom, or the memories they made together, and as she's getting closer to death, all she can try to do is console Dojima in an ever so slight way. She talks about how she wanted to take another family picture, and in her final moments, she says, "I'm so glad you were my daddy." Which is just like, fuck bro, like, there's just no words for that besides fuck, man. What happens after remains the same. Dojima rushes to Namatame's room to try and kill him, and while the cops and whoever are gone, the investigation team barge in to debate on what they should do. Considering what we've seen from the manga regarding Narukami's characterization, the volume ends on him seriously thinking of throwing him into the TV. I mean, he has the look of an ice cold killer on his face in the final pages, and this time I'm actually not joking like I was with Yusuke. Volume 11 continues right off from that moment, and Narukami comes very close to throwing him into the TV. He doesn't know if he should do it, and he doesn't know how to feel. He knows things don't make sense as it stands with the investigation, but his feelings of rage and sorrow are blinding him from thinking straight. In the end, he refuses to go through with it, and I really like what they did with the following scene in this adaptation as well. In the game, Yosuke and Kanji get really angry at his decision to not do it, but in the manga, Yosuke understands that Narukami isn't cut out for that kind of decision. Chie stops Yosuke to his delight, and Kanji, with the smallest of nudges from Rise's, falls back on his decision as well. Everybody in this moment knows they're in the wrong and blinded by rage, and all it takes is Narukami not going through with it for them to really understand that, which works super well. It's a really good way to adapt it while also showing Narukami's character, especially with this panel here where he envisions or maybe hallucinates Nanako's presence. Or hell, maybe it really was her subconscious, we don't really know because she does end up surviving the ordeal. The way they lay out the sequence of events to try to deduce the true culprit in the manga is pretty cool as well. They show a full list of suspects and which volumes the case has happened in, just in case you want to refresh your memory or try to deduce it yourself. The Namatame confrontation happens the same, which leads to December 5th, which happens to be my birthday, but more importantly, this is the most vital date in the game. This happens the same way. They deduce Adachi as the culprit, they confront him, and he dives into the TV world. Since they implemented some of the golden content beforehand, they also include Narukami's solo confrontation with Adachi in the TV world as well. This is probably the most threatening Adachi will ever look, cause he's usually looking like a fucking bum or something like that, you know what I'm saying? Which fits him. Volume 11 ends with Yosuke vowing to not let anyone know he went into the TV world alone. Volume 12 begins with the gang all together ready to take Adachi down. His whole spiel about doing it for fun and excitement and all that is all the same, but the fucking Reaper appears out of nowhere.
Is that the Grim Reaper?
Now, I'm not sure what happens here exactly, but I believe Yosuke and Kanji stay to fight the Reaper and the rest move on ahead. The girls go in a team and then Teddy plus Narukami go in another team. They end up getting there at different times, which is why I'm not too sure what happened. I guess they just took different paths. Anyway, we don't really get to see anything of Magatsu Inaba, but that would just make the manga like, I don't even know, like 500 times longer, and by this point, the manga had been taken like 10 years, and I'm sure the manga could just wanted to be done. I'm not gonna lie though, y'all, the confrontation with Adachi is low-key better than the game, because instead of them chatting and then fighting, it all happens at the same time. Adachi absolutely smokes the girls, and while he's spouting about being holier than thou, this is where the remaining characters evolve their personas to take Adachi down. Yukiko still says that dumbass thing in this manga, but I've talked about that enough, so whatever. Despite evolving their personas, once Adachi uses Magatsu Izanagi, they're pretty swiftly defeated regardless, and as that happens, that's when Narukami and Teddy appear. Narukami vs Adachi is very good, since they both acknowledge they're two sides of the same coin. Since they both have variations of Izanagi, Narukami's being the true one and Adachi's being the Magatsu variant, it shows they could have been the same had Narukami taken a wrong path and never met Nanako and the others. The best part is that the manga actually directly shows this. This is something you mostly have to infer in the game, which is by no means a bad way of doing it, but showing that Narukami, Dojima, Nanako, and Adachi all have similar struggles makes the dynamic a lot better in my opinion. It shows Narukami's past and all of their struggles together as he fronts Adachi in this final battle. Narukami starts spitting absolute facts, and since this is such a good moment, I want to showcase it in detail. He calls him out for running away from everything and never taking responsibility, and how everyone is struggling against something. No one is certain about their future and it's scary as hell, yet despite that we gotta march on, since that's what living in strength is. Even still, Narukami cannot defeat Adachi alone, but in true Persona fashion, once everyone comes together, he gets absolutely smoked. The final panels show that Narukami just wanted to be friends with Adachi above all else, and like I mentioned before, Adachi could have been saved if they had just met sooner. After Adachi gets smoked in an absolutely perfectly adapted fight that I can't even really do full justice, that's when Amino Sagiri comes through to run thy pockets. Now I can't remember right off if this is said in the PS2 version or not, but Amino Sagiri says the Hollow Forest will swallow up the world. The Hollow Forest is of course Marie's dungeon in Persona 4 Golden, but since the Hollow Forest doesn't exist in this manga, does that mean in the manga adaptation the world just ends? I mean, I guess technically so, yeah. But Marie doesn't exist in this manga either, so who really knows, I guess. It's just something to consider. They do something really cool with this fight though. The exposition behind the Sagiri existing and whatever is the same, but in the fight we get a glimpse into Adachi's thought process, because remember, he got taken over by Amino Sagiri in the first place. He realizes he was a dumbass for doing things the way he did and gives Narukami the power he needs to beat Amino Sagiri. The final panels after the battle are the two of them finally seeing eye to eye. Volume 12 ends on them doing their shabby celebration to signal the supposed final battle having concluded. And now we come to the final volume, volume 13. It starts on Christmas Day and it kicks off with Dojima Social Link finally concluding, where he makes a cake for the family and officially considers Narukami one of their own. We then come to March 20th, the final date of the game. Well, not literally the final date technically, but it's the final one you get to play in the game. We all know this is the moment in the Persona games where we say goodbye to everyone for the last time before the game hits us with the post-Persona depression, but Persona 4 is of course the exception to this rule. Although we didn't get to see much with the social links, they still included them in this final section, which is a nice touch since by the time this volume released, the game had been out for damn near 10 years, so most people probably played the game by this point, you know what I'm saying? As everyone is saying their final goodbyes at Junes, Narukami reads the letter he received from Adachi, and we get to see Adachi actually in the jail cell in the manga, which is pretty cool. Narukami confronts the ordinary gas station attendant after getting the Orb of Sight from Igor and Margaret. The gang enters Yomotsu Hirasaka, and they talk about what they want to do with their future before entering their true final fight. Upon facing Izanami, everything remains the same. He uses the Orb of Sight to dispel Izanami's illusion, and everyone saves him from the smelly demon hand things. I think it's the 1,000 Curses, I think that's what it's called. They place their faith and trust in him by saying how much he's helped them. As he's dragged into the depths, Adachi is the first one he talks to instead of being the last as it normally is. And then we get this panel. This is easily one of the best panels in the manga, it is just chef's kiss. Since the manga has put great emphasis into the dynamic between the Dojima family and Adachi, they do the same thing here, and this gives Narukami the strength to push forward toward the truth. I love what he says here, by the way. There really isn't a lot I can do alone, but it's a different story if you're all helping me out. I mean, that's just so badass. Narukami evolves his persona into Izanagi no Okami and performs the myriad truths to defeat Izanami and solve the case once and for all. And actually, this one's probably the best drawn panel of the manga. I mean, this is just... this is like 10 years of effort, just blood, sweat, and tears from the mangaka. I mean, everything led to this. Just beautiful, beautiful. We get to see the TV world in its original glory, which brings us to the true final day of the game, March 21st. Narukami says he's going to try to start anew with his parents like they did here in Inaba, which is just a great way to finish off his character arc in the manga. I mean, just the way they characterize Narukami is just so good. I really love what they did with him. The ending is just as heart-tugging as ever as Narukami steps onto the train, marking the true end of the manga and story, and the final panel is the picture they took together at Junes. A perfect ending to this adaptation and storyline. Like I said all the way at the start of this manga, I was genuinely shocked by how well this adaptation stayed true to the story while introducing new ideas and concepts. The shadow battles, Naoki's social link, Narukami's characterization, the general final battles, I mean, it's all superb. I think for any fan of Persona 4, this is an amazing read, and if you're someone who can never get into P4 at all, maybe you'll like this adaptation more, who knows? It does some things better than the game itself after all, in my opinion. But of course it does have some shortcomings as well. Sometimes the pacing can be a little off and it does have to skip some things. But for a manga, I think it did pretty damn good. I don't have too many complaints. I enjoyed my time with it. This video is already 10 times longer than I thought it was going to be, and it's taking me 3 days or something to record this, so I kind of just want to wrap this video up. It's been a very, very long video, so if you enjoyed the video, please consider dropping a like and a sub. It helps the channel out a lot, and I'll give you a free cookie as always. Here you go, homie. With that said, it's been your boy Yandere Gogeta, the P4 manga is fire, and I will see y'all in the next video. Peace out everybody, and have a great day.